welcome back to another podcast episode where we help junior developers grow and aspiring developers get jobs. For this episode, I'm actually really excited to dive into this one because we're going to be, I wouldn't call it interviewing. I'm just going to be talking with some General Assembly graduates that are all seem to be doing very well, because I did check out your LinkedIn profiles and I've talked to a couple of you before. But we're going to get your feel for what it was like. We're going to dive into your experience at the coding bootcamp. And I also kind of want to get a feel for how much of that knowledge transferred over, into your current job or whatever you're currently doing. So welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate it. If you want to... Oh, man, that screen is really small. Is it Yashoma? Did I get your name correct?
Perfect.
Okay. Awesome. You want to just give maybe a 30-second intro, maybe like where you learned coding and what you're doing now with it?
Yeah, so I'm definitely a person that's transitioned in career. So previous to coding and learning software engineering, I was actually in chemical engineering. And it was only last year, November to February, that I embarked on that transition phase at General Assembly. And entered into this software engineering realm. And since then, I have done various things like working as a teaching assistant at General Assembly, as well as some personal projects and some side companies and startups. And most recently, I have accepted a role at a AI and machine learning startup right here in Seattle.
Yeah, congratulations on getting that new role. That's really exciting.
Yeah.
All right, welcome back, Sarah. It's good to see you again.
Thank you.
You want to give a quick intro? We
Sure.
might have some new guests.
Yeah, I'm Sarah Panaligan, and I work at Federal Home Loan Bank of Chicago. I contract through Tech Systems, and today was the 6-month mark of that position. And also today, the paperwork for my promotion went through. So I am no longer a junior engineer. I am now just an IT engineer, which is really exciting.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So we're going to have a big celebration after this podcast. So it's pretty awesome timing, because it's also the anniversary of my beginning this journey as a bootcamp student. So it's kind of really cool to look at a year what's happened in my life and how it's changed completely. So I'm excited to talk about that.
Yeah, that's really cool. And if you want to hear more kind of about her journey with that, we're going to dive into it today. But we also did another podcast episode last week, and it should be live. Yeah, it's live.
It was like
but
2 weeks ago, I think.
Yeah, we did it 2 weeks ago. I released it on Monday. You're right about that. So definitely check it out if you want to hear more from Sarah. But Allie, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me. So I have a degree in accounting, and I did a little internship in public accounting, and then I found myself working for a tech startup for an advisory platform for accountants. So it was a good fit. I was doing more client-facing work, but I was always interested in what the developers were doing. So I decided to leave that position, start GA, and 3 months ago, I started my new career, basically. Like, I just graduated last week, and I'm now working back at peer review data, but as a developer this time.
That's really cool. So you're working at the same company where you decided that you want to become a developer.
Mm-hmm. I think it was just a really good fit. I already know the product. I have a degree in accounting, and now I can code. So it was a match made in heaven.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's and I think a lot of developers are just so excited to get that first job that sometimes it's not always a good cultural fit initially. So it's really cool that you got to know the company first and then you became a developer for them. I feel like that's a gift.
I definitely feel very lucky. I loved all of my coworkers. I was sad to leave them, so it was great to be able to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we're going to dive into, what's so great about General Assembly. And there is a part, we're going to dive into constructive criticism as well. because one thing I found is I think all of you, it seems like you had a really good experience, but in my experience, when we deliver these types of reviews, people take them more seriously when you're honest. And I'm not saying, you guys aren't going to be honest, but just keep that in mind. I know I came from Full Stack Academy, and I would never badmouth it. And I love the people that, I coded with, but I had to learn to, just there were things about it that could have improved, So we're going to be diving into both aspects of that. But let's actually start off with kind of like a easy, I want to let you know, if you don't want to answer the question, feel free to pass. I'm kind of just going to throw the question out there, and if someone has something to say about it, if you want to respond to someone else, that's completely fine. But we'll get started with the first one. What was the application process like for General Assembly? Was it hard? Was it complex?
I can start off with this one because I remember vaguely what it was like for me. I think to say it was hard or complex, I think that's very subjective, right? It depends on if you've had some background with coding or some exposure to it, or if it's something that's so new to you that it seems difficult and overly challenging. But what it did consist of was a 6-hour at your own pace course, I think on something called Dash online, which is made by GA, but it is public for other people to use as well. And really what it dove into was the basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which was vanilla JavaScript and jQuery. And you got just the most basic of that, a walkthrough in a slideshow format where you were given examples of code and you were asked to replicate that or adjust that in a certain way to get an output. So the first part of the assessment for me consisted of going through that entire course. And then at the end of that, producing, I believe, 2 or 3 websites where you just made small adjustments to the things that you've built throughout that 6-hour course. But you just leveled it up a little bit. So they say add this new feature or make it a mobile view, something along those lines. The other part that consisted of my admission, because I chose to do one of the financial programs that they were offering, was an additional 30 questions, I believe, that they sent. And that was just based on all the topics that we covered. And it was just meant as a way to assess if it was worth GA investing in me up front so that I may complete the program and then do that payback later. But I know that's not something that's in the typical process. It's if you elect to do this financial option. But that's what it looked like for me. In terms of difficulty, for me, it's not something that was totally new to me, coding. So it was something that I had a knack for, and I came in and was able to do the assignments smoothly. But I know that for some of my peers that were applying, there were some Slack channels that were set up as support for people who were applying to the program. Some people were having difficulty, and it was seen as extremely difficult. So I guess it varies based on past experiences, but I'm sure they have something to add about what their experiences were like.
I also chose to do the financial aid with General Assembly, and I had to take that test as well. And I think for me, that was one of the most stressful parts because it was a time test. I think it was 30 questions in 35 minutes. So you only had a minute or so to complete each question. And that was nerve-wracking. You had to get past a certain percentage correct, which I did do since I got in. But I think what helped me get through that was, along with the slideshow type thing I had to do, I also did some free Codecamp JavaScript things because coding was new to me. I had poked around some Python lessons before, but it was basically all new. So that was a big help, and I'm really glad I decided to take that as well.
Okay, so
proud about that. When you're talking about it, I'm like, oh yeah. I completely forgot. I just, spaced on that 30 questionnaire, and because I also did the Catalyst program, and I mean, if you had asked me 10 minutes ago, what did you have to do to get in? I'd been like, well, I had a conversation and then there was pre-work, but that's pretty much it. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
Really funny.
So it sounds like you had to learn a little bit up front, right? They didn't just accept someone that didn't learn any coding whatsoever. And it also sounds like there was an interview. Was it like a phone screen or in-person interview? Do you remember?
Mine was on a Zoom call because I was actually out of town.
Okay.
Or maybe I don't. Maybe it was a different platform, but I distinctly remember it being on the computer, and it was one of the first times I'd ever done that, which is kind of funny now because that's all we do all day, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, it was very novel to have an interview like a professional conversation over a video chat. But yeah, that's I had a phone screening prior to that, and then an official interview via video because I was out of town. Remember, this is pre-pandemic, so we were still doing lots of stuff in person at that time.
Okay.
Yeah, even though I wasn't. Oh, sorry.
No, you go.
Yeah, even though I wasn't out of town or anything, I also had mine over Zoom, and I think that's because the admission officers were remote. They were located wherever they were scattered, and we just kind of grabbed whoever was available. But I remember distinctly that we had to review those projects that we created with them by sharing our screens and walking them through the code, and that's what it consisted of.
Okay.
Mine was also a Zoom call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you both have the phone screen before?
Yes.
Yes.
For the Zoom. Okay, that's good because I think in my opinion, there are a lot of bad boot camps that will be a huge waste of money. And I think one importance, or like just a really important sign that a coding boot camp potentially is going to bring in and produce kind of quality software engineers. Okay, I forgot to turn off the sound of my alerts. It just freaked me out. So I think one good sign is by the way, thank you so much for the follow. I think one good sign is a rigorous interview process, right? Like I think at least even just like some sort of screening is really, really healthy. I think some coding boot camps do look at your project. Some kind of want a personality fit. But this, I didn't know that about General Assembly. So that actually makes me feel a lot better about it. You might not believe me, but that actually is a really, really good sign. But I want to dive into, what you learned. How is the curriculum? What do you think of it?
I thought the curriculum was great. Where I'm working now, it's Ruby on Rails backend, React frontend, and that's exactly what I learned at General Assembly. And it was also nice because it was JavaScript heavy, but we also learned like Ruby. So it's cool that we were able to learn multiple things because once you learn one, it's not so daunting to learn a second, and then your third or fourth or whatever comes after that. But we learned about React hooks and using functional components, which I have a friend who graduated in February, I believe, and they were still using class components. So it's very up to date. I liked how they changed the curriculum and just teach you what's being used today, like right now. So I was very happy with it.
That's so interesting because my curriculum was a little different. I think they tailor the curriculum and the choices of the actual languages based on the instructors that are teaching. Mm-hmm. And so my lead instructor, her primary language is Python. And that worked out really well because that's what I do. I'm a Python developer. So it was like you talked about a match made in heaven. It really worked out well. And that was one of the languages that I had coming in. And I was the only person in the cohort that had that coming in. So I felt like a rock star when we got to that because, I actually knew something. But yeah, I think the curriculum is really robust. They touch on everything that you need to be able to do all the components in the front and the back end, like hands down. And I think whether you learn, like in my case, Python and Django, or you learn Ruby, React is a big part of it. They pretty much, I think across the board, they teach that. And JavaScript, like you said, was very JavaScript heavy. Express, Mongoose for backend. And I think it's a really well-developed curriculum. I was really happy with it.
Yeah, and touching off of that, I also had a different curriculum. So we did not touch Ruby on Rails or anything like that, and we definitely did not do any deep dives into Python. So for me, we did a lot of heavy JavaScript focus, and the back end that was Node Express, and the front end that was React. And so that's been along the lines of like what I've been seeing as I've been looking at job prospects or like working and doing things like that. We did touch briefly at the end on other languages. We explored Python very briefly, but it was not in depth, and we never touched Ruby on Rails. But I agree with Sarah. I think it's at discretion of the instructor and what their background is. They kind of designed a curriculum for that particular GA location or whatever it is, and from there, I think that causes a lot of variation from different locations of GA.
Okay, so it's by location.
I think so, because I have heard, Ali, I'm not sure what campus you were on, but I've heard from some people at New York that Ruby on Rails was a focus there. I know in Seattle, which is the cohort I was a part of, that MERN stack and really JavaScript is the focus there. And I'm not sure where it is in the other locations.
Yeah, in Chicago, that's one of the reasons why we worked with Python, was because there's a pretty strong Python movement here in Chicago. So they knew that it would give us skills to be able to be competitive with that job market as well.
That's interesting. I had originally planned on taking the cohort in Chicago when I thought it was going to be in person, but since it went to React, one of my instructors was in New York and one of them was in California. So yeah, they really have it all spread out now, but I don't remember hearing about Chicago being more Python heavy. I actually, yeah, I don't know if other options were presented to me.
That's interesting. There are a lot of jobs when I was looking for positions that asked for Python here specifically. Yeah, maybe I'm making that up. I don't know.
Oh, no, I'm not doubting you. I just don't remember GA telling me like the Chicago place is more, we're going to teach you Python. Like, I don't know.
Okay. So that's really interesting. I think it's hard enough to come up with a curriculum that's shared and sticks with one stack and just reiterate on it. That's really difficult. I had no idea General Assembly kind of adapted to the local tech scene. That's really cool. And the fact that they're able to pull it off. You know what I'm actually curious of? How long did it take each of you to get a job after you graduated?
So I would say mine was kind of varied. So I did have an internship opportunity immediately after, and I worked actually with GA immediately after completing my cohort as a TA, and I continued working for a large part of the summer there. And it was only recently that I landed my first full-time role, and then so that would say about a 6 month at the 6 month mark, which I think is common and typical for GA grads.
Yeah, it took me 3 months to land my full-time position. I was hired at Trilogy within a couple of weeks of graduating. I think I had the interview a couple days after graduation. It was, I got my certificate and the next day I started getting calls. It was really weird. Very encouraging because I was nervous about doing this. But it was a part-time thing, and originally the cohort was supposed to start in January, and then that cohort didn't work out for me as the TA, and then my cohort started in April. And so we're in the midst of it. It's a part-time thing, and I knew I could have a second job with it. I will say, if we weren't remote, I don't know that I would have done the cohort at all. And we have about 8 weeks left to it, and I'm sort of happy and sad at the same time because I really like the people that I work with, but I'm also just really looking forward to getting evenings back and weekends back. I get 1 day off a week right now, and it's like, I mean, you wake up Sunday morning and you're like, okay, day off, and you're like, okay, not really, because I gotta go to the grocery store and clean my house and do all this stuff, and then I get to go back to work for 6 days. So I am looking forward to having real weekends again. But that's my only gripe with the job, because I actually really like it.
I think my job search was a little atypical since I had been having conversations with the CEO of Peerview Data like throughout the cohort. So pretty much immediately after, I think I had Thursday, Friday, and then I started working on Monday after I graduated. So
Wow.
immediately.
Did you have to do like the technical stuff? Did you have to do the technical interviewing and stuff, or because you knew them, you didn't? You kind of got a pass.
I kind of got a pass. We had a conversation about what I learned, but I didn't have to do any whiteboarding or anything. I was kind of looking forward to that in like a nervous way, but maybe I'll ask him to do that later.
I was just going to suggest that. You can still do it, I'm sure. That's really cool, though. I think that's just the power of networking in general, just knowing people. So I'm going to challenge us a little bit. So I host a web development mentorship in Chicago. I can't do it in person, with the pandemic, but something that I noticed, we get a lot of bootcamp grads that come in, and when they come from a bootcamp where they went through a curriculum that teaches JavaScript and Python, or Ruby and JavaScript, or like it kind of just pairs two different languages, I found that sometimes there are a lot of gaps in knowledge because you only have so much time in the coding bootcamp, right? And so you're spread thin a little bit more. Do you feel like coming out of a General Assembly, do you feel like your knowledge was spread too thin and it was hard to like retain a lot of what you learned, or even just have some in-depth knowledge into it? Did you struggle with that at all?
I think because we didn't learn about class components for React, like I think we touched on it for half a day, but sorry, I'm like forgetting what I wanted to say. Sorry, can you come back to me? I don't know why I'm blanking.
You're fine. What about?
I don't know. I mean, I think you're not gonna get a computer science degree from a 13-week bootcamp. So if that's your expectation, then you're going to be disappointed. I think it gives you the tools it gives you a really broad overview of what you need to know, and some in-depth work of, the MERN stack. And I think beyond that, it's up to you to continue to learn. I think it's a starting place rather than an endpoint.
Yeah, I agree wholly with what Sarah said. So I think coming into a boot camp that runs on this time limit, it's really hard to expect that you're going to know everything or you're going to truly master everything that they've touched upon. But I think what you should be looking to get out of it is exactly what you said, the strong foundation that sets you up for knowing the basics of something, but also allows you to learn about the resources that you can use, whether those are people of your network or resources online or typical forums, to find the answers or to learn more or to have that understanding. Because I think going in, right, and expecting that you need to learn for 4 weeks and that's it, you can stop learning and you'll be all okay. I think that's not a good expectation. It's not a realistic one. The learning doesn't stop there. And, our career coach said it's a marathon. You have to keep running even after boot camp to sort of get all of the foundations down and to really be ready to enter the job sphere, to make contributions, but yeah, that just comes with any boot camp, I think.
Mm-hmm. Going back to what I was trying to say earlier. So yeah, we didn't go over class components for React very much, but like I know that they exist and I'll be able to learn that. Part of GA was learning how to learn, and like you both said, it's once you learn something and know one language, it's easier to find out more. So I agree there are some things that they don't go over all the way, but never stop learning. You always have to keep going. And
I think that's a really healthy mindset. And argue that it's one of the main reasons that all of you got jobs as quickly as you did, because there are a lot of graduates that do come out and they put all this money into the coding boot camp and they kind of expect that job right afterwards. And sometimes they take a little bit of a break, or they feel like they've learned everything that they need to in order to get that job. And then there's this disconnect, and then they start losing what they retained. And I think all of you have the right mindset that it is a marathon, but this is a really important message for everyone, because a lot of people struggle with this. And at the end of the day, you have to decide, because some people switch to coding careers for different reasons. And some people have the mindset of just learn a set amount and then you're going to get a job and you're going to be set, right? You're going to be successful in that career. The job's going to teach you everything that you need to know. But yeah, I'm really happy to hear that. I might even use this as kind of like the intro or the highlight, because this is so important. So what were your instructors like? I think all of you had different instructors that taught different things. What were they like?
Who wants to go first? I'll hop in first. I remember my instructor was absolutely amazing. She'd been working in the industry for a while, and she was a really strong coder. And I think one thing that makes you want to learn as a student is having confidence in your instructor's ability to answer your questions. So that's really important. Like if I ask a question and you give me the wrong answer, the chances are I'm going to be like, the next time I'm going to ask him, like, maybe I'll try to figure it out first or something like that. But I was really confident in her ability to help me and help me learn and retain material. And she also did it in a really clever way. It wasn't hand-holding and it wasn't spoon-feeding. It was learning about the resources to help you learn to figure out the answer. So her direction during the course was always ask questions, as many questions as you want. But also, before you ask someone else that question, take the time to figure it out, set a time limit, and learn. And I think that's what really pushed everyone in our cohort forward. It motivated us to self-learn, which I think has been a really important tool. It's been really helpful so far. She also has designed curriculums for the longest time, and she had a lot of experience helping students that were excelling, helping them feel more challenged, but also helping students that were staggering behind catch up. She had lesson plans available to help people feel confident that there was a path that they can follow, and if they follow that path, they will get to the end and they will have something out of that boot camp. And so I would say it was a really positive experience, and she was amazing at what she did. There was a reason why she was an instructor.
That's awesome. Yeah, we had actually 2 lead instructors. I don't know, Allie, if you had that as well because of a big cohort.
Yeah. We did, yes. And they took turns depending on the week.
Yep. Oh, right. Because you said one was in New York and one was in California. So the female lead in my cohort was amazing. What was so inspiring about her is that she was entirely self-taught. And so it gave us this perspective of you can do this on your own. She's like, but you get such a leg up of getting some formal, you don't have to go through years of trial and error and wonder if what you're doing is the right thing. But yeah, she was absolutely incredible. And she also was really sounded really similar to yours, your instructor, Yashoma, where she would give you enough to find the answer on your own. She wouldn't tell you, she'd never tell you directly. Mm-hmm. But she would give you enough information that you at least knew where to look, or you at least knew what the next step was. And if you got stuck again, she would be there to help you. And our other lead, it was his first cohort. And again, amazing coder. I mean, it was incredible to watch how he would deconstruct things in his mind. He got more confident as an instructor as the cohort went. I would say that would be my only gripe, is that, from the instructional standpoint, he didn't always know how to explain what he was doing because he knew how to do it. But he got stronger as that time went on. And total disclaimer, I'm a 20-year veteran teacher. So I see that through the lens of you're not breaking this down. We need more information here, and so I have a really special sort of prism that I look through from that perspective, and I can, kind of dissect instructional content in that way. But I think, both of my instructors were very strong, and that, knowing that, I agree. I think it gives you a lot of confidence.
I always marveled at my instructors because all of them were so patient. If we all had bugs, if we had to download something and no one could do it, they would have us go on screen and we would debug as a class, which I found very helpful, because if you see someone have an error, you might have that later on and you'll know possibly where to look to go and change that. But they also always were so positive, and I know for me, it could be frustrating to all these students are having all these bugs and we just solved this one. Weren't you paying attention? But this is why I'm not a teacher. But they were always so patient, and they did have us try to work things out on our own too. And if we couldn't, they would come in and explain things. But I applaud them. They're all very knowledgeable, great instructors.
That sounds really like another good experience. And Sarah, you even had mentioned that there was a new instructor, because I had a new instructor too. I was one of the first cohorts where she taught, and she had some, I wouldn't say trouble, but she had some growth to do with just being a teacher. She's a really good coder, and I think it's really interesting to see what a brand new instructor does and kind of how they grow with the cohort, because I think that's very telling with how much support that they do receive, because I'm sure that instructor got a lot of feedback throughout the cohort. But that's really good to hear. Even from your 20 years of experience, you had a positive light on them. But that's cool. I think the instructors make or break the program. I'm really glad that you have had good instructors. And I'm sure General Assembly has, filtered out certain instructors, but it sounds like you had a really good experience with that. And all of you kind of mentioned, some of the good qualities that came from the instructors. They were patient. They kind of taught you to have the mindset to learn a little bit on your own as much as you can, rather than kind of spoon feeding you that information. Because as you mentioned, it's just when you get outside of the boot camp, you're on your own. You have to continue learning. You have to know how to do it. So I love that all of your instructors instilled that in you. So another, really stressful part of a coding boot camp is the time investment, right? Especially if you're doing full time. Did everyone here do a full-time program?
Yes.
Yep.
But we had different experiences in that I was full-time in person. They were full-time online. So there is a little bit of difference there, but yes, I think they're all saying full-time.
Okay, so let's actually break that down between the two. How was the full-time in person like?
I thought it was perfect for me because I love accountability. I love getting up and being forced to be there at 9 a.m. and then hopping ship 5 p.m. and then coming home, having that grind. It's very familiar to me as well, because throughout my school, that's what I was used to, and so it was something that I could easily fit into the way that I learn already. For me, the other advantage was that I had a very small class size, and we had talked about this before we hopped on here. My class was a class of 8, and so we were very small. We got to know each other really well. It led to a lot of one-on-one time, being able to fix issues and understand that way, and I would say that was one of the greatest advantages of it. And it worked well for me. I'm not sure if it worked well for others. Personally, I set time aside, and that was my only commitment. I didn't have any other second jobs or second schooling or familial commitments. That was my focus and my grind for the entirety of the program.
Would you say that, so did you invest 40 hours a week into the program? Is about...
More than 40 hours. I think if you're going to do the bare minimum, expect the bare minimum back in return. There is the 40 hours that you're expected to be in the classroom every week. So that's the default. You are giving homework assignments every day, and some of those might extend past 2 hours. Typically, they might be the span of 2 to 3 hours per day. And then your weekend assignments on Friday tend to be longer and bulkier assignments. And depending on how comfortable you are with where the curriculum is right now, they might take you between like 8 to 12 to 20 hours, right? Depending on if you get stuck on something, a silly bug or something like that. But yeah, definitely to invest more than 30 hours. And I think that should be regardless of if a bootcamp is doing a really good job of letting that curriculum sink in. It should just be a part of learning if you really want to compress it into such a small time frame.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Would that be about...
My kid, like, didn't have a mom for 3 months. I mean, it was intense. I would say it was closer to 70 hours a week, if I'm going to be honest.
Okay, so about 70 for you.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. And the first 2 weeks, I think, were the hardest because I was used to working 9 to 5 at a job, but having homework, going back to that was rough. I would like to say, I think our instructors were really respectful of our time because they gave us 10-minute breaks on the hour, which I loved. Like, now that I'm working again and not taking a break every hour, I do feel it at the end of the day, but getting those little breaks throughout, it was just a nice little mind refresh. So it did break up these 60-hour weeks that we were going through.
Okay, that's probably another reason why all of you got jobs very fast. And I think it can be startling and overwhelming at first, especially the first 2 weeks when you realize, wow, I really don't know anything and I have a lot to learn. So, but I do think a good boot camp instills, it is important to not do the bare minimum. And if you, like you said, Yeshoma, right? I feel like I'm going to butcher it at some point. But yeah, like you said, if you're going to do the bare minimum, you're going to get the bare minimum back. That's the results that you're going to leave the coding bootcamp with. I think that's really important. For the remote session, so I like the in-person experience with Full Stack Academy because I also like the accountability. And they did a really good job of just helping me realize, okay, my brain can only really handle maybe like 4 to 5 hours of coding. And I just have to kind of split my certain tasks up throughout the day so that I can be more effective. Because I can't code 8 hours a day and be productive for 8 hours straight. I just can't do it. I think most people can't. And the coding bootcamp definitely taught me that. I was able to talk to the instructors in person and just kind of get their experience. And like, I had instructors where they realized like, I'm getting stressed and, I'm just like beating my head against the wall on a problem and I can't pass it. And they knew the right moments to kind of just encourage me to take a break. But they were able to see that because it was in person. What about the remote experience? I'm kind of curious what that was like. Do you feel like you got that accountability? Do you feel like you do? Can you talk about that?
I mean, I chose remote because I live an hour from the closest campus. And so the thought, I knew it was going to be a lot of outside time for, that I would have to put in. And when I calculated a 2-hour commute into the hours of homework and things that I knew I would need to do to really be successful with this, it was too much time for me to travel downtown for that in-person experience. So like that, and that was a personal choice, because like I said, we weren't in the middle of this, can't see anyone. We were required to be online by 9. I mean, that was then they took attendance. And I know that, if you started to stretch that limit, they would talk to you. I was really disciplined, so that wasn't an issue for me, but I know that some of my fellow cohort was harder for them, and they would get messages, they would get like kind of talked to. So I think the accountability was absolutely there. Maybe where it wasn't as strong is in the group project. I don't know what your group project experience was like. I loved the solo projects because I could set my own schedule and do what, kind of work at the pace that I felt comfortable with. But the group project was hard because I had a group of 4 with the 3 or 4 of us did a lot of work in that project. And
I remember you mentioning this.
That was hard. That was
Mhm.
really difficult to shoulder that fourth person. You know, there were times where we would meet for 6 hours outside of the, you know, like the class time, and there were only 3 of us meeting, and it's like, wow, you missed like most of the project. We made a whole bunch of choices last night that you just didn't show up for. So, you know, I think, and I that happens in real life. That happens on the job too. I mean, you can see it. You can see the people who are like not present, not like participating, and then the people who are, you know, hungry for more. So
Was that
I
a
guess
was that a situation where that person just you felt like they didn't care enough, or did they just have other commitments that they could not break away from?
I felt like they didn't, because that was the mindset. And so by the
Hmm.
time we got to project 3, their foundation wasn't as strong as the other 3 of us.
Okay, so
And
is their
so they
mindset.
couldn't really contribute in the same way. And so just kind of checked out.
Okay.
I mean, that was my impression. Maybe I'm totally off base. I don't know. But that was
Yeah.
my
Okay.
mm-hmm.
I would say that they did keep us accountable. Had to be on camera, muted at 9 a.m. And sometimes if we came back for lunch and someone didn't have their camera on, they would call them out, mention it, like, cameras on, please. That was also nice because, like, they would keep us accountable, but our instructors also kept themselves accountable. Like, at the end of the day, they would always send a survey, like, what went well, what didn't go well. And there were a few days where they must have gotten some negative feedback because they were like, okay, it seems everybody had a tough time with yesterday's topic. Let's go slower today. And they would pace the class accordingly. So that was nice.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. I, again, forgot about that. But you're absolutely right. It was daily surveys. And there were times that I gave feedback and it was immediately responded to the next day. And it's anonymous. Like, it's not like I put my name in there and said, and this is how I feel. It was just, they got that feedback and they reacted to it. And only I know that it was because of something I said, but I definitely benefited from the fact that they reacted so quickly.
That's really cool. I'm glad to hear that they did that. Our instructors did that as well, and it was really interesting to see them even just like adjust the part of the curriculum that a good chunk of the cohort was struggling with, and they would change it, and they just kind of figured out a way to tweak it to catch certain people up, and that's a hard skill to do and have like an ever-changing curriculum like that. Okay, so I think we've really talked a lot about, you know, what the experience was like during the coding bootcamp. What I want to dive into now is, what was it like afterwards? Specifically, when you graduated, how well were you prepared, or how well did you feel like you were prepared for a real developer position?
So, I mean, I would say I feel like I was prepared to start job looking for sure. I'd say that because the way that the career program was oriented was throughout the program, you had to hit milestones. And so those milestones consisted of creating a resume, getting it vetted by the career coach, modifying your LinkedIn profile, setting up all these things along the way. So by the end, you had an online presence, you had a portfolio ready, you had things that were vetted and ready to put out there. Granted, there was still a lot of learning to do. And I think one of the biggest places for me in terms of filling the gaps was with data structures and algorithms. And I'm not sure if that was
Me
the
too.
case for me as well. But yeah, that was the biggest thing, that you kind of have to do that on your own. You better be ready to do it on your own before you sort of embark on these journeys to go look for the jobs, because you definitely check the boxes of touching these technologies and having the ability to work with React and create full stack projects, right? You have proof, you've created these projects. But that technical part of the interview and the job process is the part that's going to, I think, hit a little harder coming fresh out of the bootcamp.
Yeah, especially if you're going through the full interview process. That's the expectation, is that you can solve those things. I'm actually I've kept that going. And it's interesting because I work with algorithms all day. I code in Python and I work with AWS, and I'm a backend program. I'm actually a backend engineer. And because we take things from concept all the way through the process to the development process to production. So we really are engineers, and I have a new appreciation for that now. If you had asked me 6 months ago if I could do what I'm doing now, I would have laughed at you. So I think it's a mindset. I think what I was given in this boot camp was this ability to digest enormous amounts of information very, very quickly and assimilate into my everyday. But as part of that, I've kept up the daily practice. So I was working on day 73 of my second round of 100 days of code. And so and these are all algorithms of varying difficulty. We're going to level up when we hit 75. So I'm actually doing this with my cohort and encouraging them to also code every day. And after 75 problems at day 76, we're going to go up to 5 KYU. And, if you've done Code Wars, you know that those are pretty hard. Mm-hmm. So I'm challenging myself at the end of a really long day. And the only days I don't do this, I do this 5 days a week. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, when I also leave my day job and go teach my night job, I don't do a code. And you can see in my GitHub, it's like solid green until I started that job. And then you can see all these holes. It's really funny. It's so obvious when I started working my second position. But I think that daily practice is so key. And even now, I'm in a position and I'm coding all day. I still, after coding all day, will turn off the computer for an hour and then come back and sit down and do an algorithm, because you have to keep practicing.
When we first started, algorithms were so hard for me. I thought I would never get this. Like, can I do this even? But because we had to do them every single day, like, you get better. You start seeing patterns and like creating fun new ways of like doing the same algo but in a different way. And now that I've graduated, all of our cohort has created a second Slack where we are going through Crack the Coding interview together. So we're still having like a weekly algo. So I think the community structure has been really nice, because we realize that that's hard and we should all keep practicing, because if you don't use it, you'll lose it.
We did that too, Allie. And now we're a year out and we still keep in touch. We still
That's amazing.
On Slack. Absolutely.
So nice.
I've not met any of these people in person, but I consider them my friends 100%.
I love that.
I have that similar thing. I think one thing with GA is the networking and they really put the resources out there and encouragement out there for you guys to stay in touch. But I will say one thing that I noticed both of you said is that you did coding challenges every day as part of the GA curriculum. That was not the case for me.
Oh no, all of mine after. Yeah, I started it after I graduated. That was something I put on myself.
Wow. Yeah, we had an hour for algos every morning.
Oh, so we didn't have that. For me, we had whiteboard Wednesdays, which was just I think like a 2 or 1 hour commitment every Wednesday. But I think it was at the discretion of the instructor that they made that decision. And it was something that I recommended, to have some sort of daily morning data structures and algorithm, because by the end, I definitely didn't feel as ready to answer those problems as I'm sure Ali might have felt by challenging herself like every day on those, because she was required to as part of the curriculum.
It was nice too. We had breakout rooms. So sometimes they would be work on the algo by yourself, but sometimes it would be as a group doing some pair programming. So it was also nice to be able to talk with someone about how to work through something. I think that is a huge benefit, being able to talk about code too.
Yeah.
I agree.
Sounds like the network was really good with General Assembly. What about the job assistants from General Assembly themselves, staff members, maybe like career coaches, anything like that? Did they keep in touch with you? Did they provide any job assistance afterwards?
Yeah, my coach was awesome. Yeah.
Is it someone that you connected with like every week to see how things are going, or? What was it like? Just reach out if you do need help, if you...
No, we had formal, we actually, I don't know if this happened for you, Yashoma, and I know you just graduated, Allie, so you don't know yet, but
I don't know.
but we had like a career boot camp after graduation. Did you guys have something like that?
We had 2 days of career boot camp, which was the wrap up. Let's go over all these big things, negotiating, networking, what you may have questions of. Like, it was 2 full days, I think, of just getting it all together before you jump off the bus there and just start running.
We had like a day, I think, or a chunk of a day or something. Yeah. Similar to that, where it was, like, let's get your final resume, let's have these conversations. But our coach actually checked in, I think, weekly. Did you?
Yeah. During cohort, we actually have, I think, a 4-hour or 2-3, I don't remember the exact time, but we call them Career Thursdays. So that first part of the morning was dedicated to just going one-on-one with the career coach. The career coach was the instructor for that period of time. We were introduced to different things. There was networking, imposter syndrome, different things tackling these different areas of the job search and what to expect. So it doesn't seem as alarming or overwhelming once you complete the boot camp to sort of embark on that search. So that was throughout the program. And then at the end, we had the boot camp. Following up, they had these weekly surveys that they sent out through email that you were expected to fill out. And so the expectation to remain in the career program and to get career advice and work with the coach was that you apply to at least 10 jobs weekly. And then you fill out that survey and say about the job you're excited about, the jobs you've applied for, how are you looking, how are you feeling about it? And that's the way that you keep in touch with the career coach. I will say my experience was unique in that it went beyond just the email survey correspondence, because we used Slack as our way of keeping in touch. I was able to reach out to my career coach whenever I needed help with anything. And at her earliest convenience, she just got back to me. And that's how we kept the process moving forward. So for me, I didn't really use the surveys as a way to track my progress. I kind of did it on my own. And took that upon myself. And then I just reached out as I needed help or assistance or guidance on something that was job oriented.
Yeah, that was kind of my experience too. But in addition to that, we actually had weekly meetings, I think, because we had such a huge cohort. And then after 6 weeks, she pulled in another cohort because a bunch of people had dropped off and had been hired or whatever. And she, so it was a group. I mean, it was like 10 or 15 of us that kind of went through, and it was almost like graduation again when you got a job because you didn't have to go to that anymore, but yeah, it was really great. I liked the support that we had, and it's funny, I think at first I definitely, this is my third career, so I come in with a lot, a little salty and a little bit of oh, okay, I will say that at a certain point I just said fine, and I drank the Kool-Aid, and I'm so glad I did because it was definitely a point where I saw it working, and that was when I was in the throes of multiple interviews a week, and I knew it was going to be soon because it was really picking up, and within a couple of weeks that was when I got my offer. But it is interesting. There's definitely a point where you kind of have to trust the process because the things that they're telling you to do are hard. The thing, 10 applications a week doesn't sound like a lot, but it wasn't just, okay, you click here and hit send. It's research the company, reach out to somebody or 2 people in that company, come up with a list of questions that you have, do all this stuff. And each one, tailor your cover letter, even if they're not asking for one, specific to that job 10 times. I mean, and then on top of that, you had to do your networking and you had to do your, articles, and you had to keep practicing. And I found that was more than the boot camp, actually. But yeah, it was a lot of work. And like I said, I think at a certain point, I definitely just swallowed that pill and said, okay, I'm going to do this. This is my job now. And it did work. But it, you said it earlier, and I'm going to say it again. You get out of it what you put into it. And I think all three of us are a testament to that.
I would agree to that. Absolutely. So overall, that's kind of the missing piece that I really didn't have was the post job assistance. So I'm glad all of you went into great detail about that. It sounds pretty similar to Full Stack Academy, and it sounds like they even provided that accountability with that survey, and I think they kind of laid down some expectations as well. But that's really cool. It sounds like a really good post-grad program. So overall, really good experience, and I think all of you are good models for future students that are going into the program, and that's kind of why I chose all three of you to come onto the podcast, because I just, like I said, I had a good feeling about all three of you. But now, I think you had a really good experience. Now I want to dive into some constructive criticism. What could they do a little bit better? What could they do differently? So let's actually get specific about this. What about the curriculum? Do you have any constructive feedback for what was being taught, the material that was being taught, what you learned? Anything about that?
I do.
Okay.
And I have the perspective of being a teacher for a really long time. So there's that. But in addition to that, I actually am a TA at a different program. And the curriculum is really different. It's essentially the same overall concepts, but the way they teach it is very, very different. And I would say that going through the same stacks from a different perspective has really solidified my understanding of things. And watching the way that the program that I'm currently working with breaks things down, they really take every single piece and they will take you from the minuscule to the full. And I don't think that General Assembly does that. They didn't take the time, and I can give you a specific example. When we switched from our front end JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and we jumped into the back end, there was not really a connection. I mean, yes, obviously we were working with JavaScript, but we spent an entire day kind of copying code from our lead instructor, had no idea what it was going to do. At the end of the day, we're like, okay, now do node space, I don't know if it was server.js or whatever this file, index.js, and it'll work. And for some of us, it was like, yay. And for the rest of us, we're like, I have a sea of errors and I don't know what I did wrong. And I think there was a lot of disconnect there. I mean, at least in my experience. And yeah, after doing that a few times, totally understood how all those pieces broke down and how it worked. But I remember thinking, gosh, this is an awful lot of code to be doing before you can test it out. And the current program that I'm in, they didn't do it that way. And there were a lot of intermediate steps, and there was a lot of checking and balancing as you did it. So we never spent a whole period of time just coding things out and then saying, okay, now run your node server and it should all work. Like, that's not been my experience at all with my current cohort. And I definitely appreciate having it broken down a little bit more and having a stronger continuity of, okay, we've done all this JavaScript and working with DOM, and now we're going to start to use it in the back end and manipulate things so that we can run it through a server and then it shows up on the front end. Like, I feel like that piece was missing. We did get it, but we didn't have the journey. It was like all of a sudden we started here, we picked up and moved over here. And that was jarring, I think.
I was just about to say that word. It sounds a little bit jarring.
Yeah, I'm not sure about, I feel like I felt that I was on the student side, right? And I felt that jar of when something new comes in and just hits you right in the face and you're like, oh man, like it's totally different. And it's like, why are we learning this new thing if this thing worked? And there's so many questions that pops into the mind of the student. And I'm not sure if there was something that our instructors could have done, like you said, broken it down, because I don't really see it from that perspective, right? But I don't know if there is something that they can do to help that transition go a little smoother, because I did feel it as well. Whatever that is that they need to do, I think that would be really helpful, because I did work as a GA for a bit after completing the cohort. And I noticed that the real switch of like where the difficulty steps in is where you make that change from front end to back end. And suddenly it seems like all of the dots have just been like, everything's just been unplugged. That's what it feels like to a student, right? And now it's like, I thought what we were creating the whole time was like a full app. What is this back end thing that like, so a lot of that stuff was missing. I remember having to like pull up diagrams to show them how computers talk to certain things and what that looks like in a diagram format. But I definitely feel if that could be incorporated in some way, whether as supplemental materials, maybe like read this before you come to class today, or in some other way, maybe in the curriculum, the way that they're teaching it, apart from just like coding along, maybe something different that's more interactive. But I definitely felt that jar as well. But I'm not sure if it's something that just comes with the territory of trying to learn so much in such a little time. But the one thing that I will say that I wanted to see a lot more of, and I would have expected by looking at the curriculum before went to GA, was the data structure and algorithm focus. So I realized that it's very important to learn how to code full stack apps, but it's also really important to understand the need to code something beyond something that just works, right? Your obligation is to code something that works, yes, but to optimize it, to make it better, to think further along instead of just thinking of what's the first thing that comes to mind that it's going to work. And I think having experience with data structures and algorithms and understanding why they're important very early on can set you up and set up what your expectations are for your code and the quality of code that you're going to deliver later on. And so with that being said, I would have loved if my curriculum, for example, was similar to Allie's, where we had a daily obligation. So we had that chance to interact with people as we were doing it on a daily basis, or work alone, and sort of meddle through that, because that was kind of what I had to do on my own after cohort. But I do think it is something relatively easy to incorporate inside of the curriculum and help students get a lot more out of it. But that would be my main critique.
I was going to say something about data structures as well. When we had our hour-long ALCO every day, there were a couple of times where we didn't do that and we went over like what are linked lists, but definitely not that often. And they would describe like some data structures, but wouldn't really tell you how these things are used or why. It was just like, this is a thing that exists, here you go. And I wish they had maybe spent a little bit more time on data structures.
Yeah, I don't know if it's similar for you, Allie or Sarah, but at the end, it was like the last 2 weeks where everything for data structures and algorithm got smushed. And now it's like, wait, now we're getting introduced to these things that basically determine your job search and everything to follow, right? Your ability to learn and like now it's like, whoa, now where did these guys come from? And so that was jarring in itself. And I don't think it should have been. Like, it shouldn't have been something we were scared of or didn't want to embark on or didn't want to feel challenged with. I think if it's introduced early on and you understand the importance of it, you're more willing to just struggle through it and strive through it throughout the whole program, not just the final week or two.
Yeah, we had like these videos where they would show you how it, like in a visual format, how it worked. And then there would be a thing at the end that said, now build one. And it's like, okay, I understand how this works. I have no idea how to code that out. Like, you might as well tell me that I can now go build an engine in a car, because guess what? I have no idea how to do what you just did. So yeah, there was that.
Did you ever code one out? Like, if you learn the concept of a linked list and how it works, how to interact with it, did you ever get some sort of like a workshop to actually code out a linked list in the language you were learning?
Yeah, but the thing is, you said you ended that with the language you were learning. And so it was funny because, like I said, throughout the whole program, we learned JavaScript. And when we hit data structures and algorithm within that last week, we're introduced to Python. And the language that we mainly wrote these algorithms in was Python. And so I think for students, it was a double complexity, like a double whammy. It was like, if you were newly to Python and you didn't quite get it, well, guess what? Now you also have data structures and algorithm, and you didn't quite get it. So there's a lot of challenges that come with that unless you're on top of your game.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
All right, that's fair. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it was more of a code along, like, here's how to do this. It wasn't really like set forth and make it yourself. I think there was one day where we tried to, and maybe like one of the breakout rooms was able to explain their answer, but it was tough.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the illusions of confidence you get from running through tutorials. And a good tutorial is you understand the concept and you think you're able to do it, and then when you finally sit down, you don't really even know where to start. And I think that's it's definitely good feedback, and it's a good teller that the program they need to change something to better help you like translate that knowledge into actual implementation, and like help you learn about the process in which, like, how you're even going to start structuring a linked list, and all the components that it needs, and how to like specifically use the syntax that you're learning to write that. And that is another tricky thing. It feels like General Assembly does it pretty well, but when you are learning two different syntaxes, even if they are similar, when you are learning new concepts in a different syntax, there's just this exponential complexity that just it's overwhelming sometimes. So I think that's really good feedback.
I consider myself fluent in both Python and JavaScript, but if I've been in one language all day, it takes my mind a few minutes to really be able to switch. They're similar, but they are not the same. There are things that you can do in Python that you can't do in JavaScript. There are things that you can do in JavaScript that don't translate really. So it's, there are little things, and man, you have to have your head on straight. So I can't imagine trying to do, I don't remember that being a thing in my cohort where we had to do it in Python, but maybe I just don't remember.
I think the motivation behind that was that Python has all these built-in functions. Like, it's the language that is seen as like the simplest one, right, to read, and you can write a lot more and get a lot more stuff executed in a lot less lines. And I think that was the motivation behind that. But like I said, it added a complexity that it wasn't necessary. But I also think that the way in sort of exploring data structures and algorithms comes with learning a language like Python or like JavaScript. But whereas something like Java, you're forced to sort of see data structures, and you're sort of thinking of them because you need to declare variables, thinking of what types they are, and thinking of what you're going to create that way. And so that was something that I learned after. And like I said, there was a lot of self-learning after, but I feel like it wouldn't have taken much to squeeze it in into the bootcamp if possible, if there was a way for them to do that.
So we did most of our algorithms were in JavaScript, but towards the end when we were learning Ruby, it switched to Ruby as well. And at first that was so tough. It was like, I'm just learning this language, and I can do this in JavaScript, but I'm glad that they made us do that, because it did eventually get easier, and you learn that you can do things in both languages, and it's all right.
I think that's really good feedback, though. Okay, this was really, really helpful. I think all of you are very articulate, and you were able to really just identify pretty much your entire journey throughout this process. And it's a hard thing to talk about it, especially live. And I think all of you did a really, really good job of it. So thank you. Thank you so much for that. But I think we have a good chunk of what I would call like a review for this coding bootcamp. I think we dove into everything that I wanted to. What I like to do is we just had a couple of questions in chat. If you guys don't mind answering. So Sarah, you're focused on the back end. Shoma and Allie, what about you two?
So most of my roles have been on the front end. And in the most recent internship, I did explore the back end quite a bit with AWS and doing things there. Moving into this new role, I expect it to be mainly focused on front end, but I do see myself drifting into those back end roles as well. Because it's where, like I said, for me, the challenges are, and those challenges really drive me, and I want to be there and solve those challenges. And so that's where I see myself moving to eventually.
Okay.
My startup is pretty small, so we all wear multiple hats, front end and back end over here.
Okay, cool. All right, and the last question is, what's your favorite code editor? What do you use?
VS Code for beginners.
VS Code.
I use WebStorm. So it's a JetBrains project, and I really, really like it. Now at work, I use VS Code because it's what's given to us. But yeah, I pay for it, and it's worth it to me to pay for it. I really like it.
Yeah,
I
enjoy
heard good things about WebStorm.
But if I must say, for anyone who's asking about code editors, because of the syntax highlighting, there's so many features that it's irresistible to someone that just, you get used to it after a while and you get kind of addicted. The debugging tools, there's just so much to work with. And it's such a nice interface to use. And so it was perfect, I think, for me. As opposed to Sublime, it constantly reminds you, hey, you want to upgrade?
Yeah.
Sublime, yeah.
I would say, yeah, VS Code's great because it's free. And if I had known that, I probably would have just used that. My friend who kind of turned me on to coding, he was like, hey, Sarah, you need to get WebStorm. Like, WebStorm's where it's at. And I was like, okay, because I didn't know any, I was like, all right, Brian, I'll do that. And I did. And I was like, oh, this is an annual thing. You have to pay for it. He's like, yeah, but then you get like grandfathered in, and it's like $35 a year or something. And you get all the updates. And if you don't want to pay the licensing fee, you just keep the current version of what you have. But I like getting the upgrades. I like getting the new themes and stuff and playing around with it. But I do see some differences. One of the things that I really like about it that's different from VS Code is it has these little helper things that it puts in. So like when you create a function, for example, it'll label kind of in gray what the pieces of your function are. So when you, especially if you have a really complex program, when you get to the end and you're calling your function, it'll tell you as you're typing in what matches with what. And I really like that feature. Because you're never going to get mixed up which one's the callback. Like it'll say callback. And so that's one of the sort of things I can think right off the top of the head that really, really like that feature of it.
Nice. I've never used WebStorm, but some of the things that you're mentioning are pretty similar to a buddy of mine when he talked about it. I didn't know it cost, actually. But it sounds pretty cheap. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of VS Code. I have everything stacked in VS Code. I'm probably not going to leave anytime soon. But okay, those were kind of the bonus questions. Like I said, I think all of you did a really good job describing kind of how your experience went. I think this is going to be really helpful towards people that are considering a coding bootcamp in general. And so, one of my goals is, and I'm going to be doing more of this, I want to invite graduates from so many different boot camps and just, really try to filter out really, really good coding boot camps. I'd love to come up with a list because I like recommending resources to junior developers that come to me. So this was super helpful. Thank you so much. Let's do our outros. If you want to pass, just say pass. But otherwise, Yashoma, we'll start with you. Where can people reach you? Or anything else you want to shout out?
LinkedIn.
Okay.
Well, it's just my name on LinkedIn, right? Just YBanana is the extension. But you feel free to add me on LinkedIn and ask me any questions you may have, GA or otherwise. I'm always happy to help or answer anything to the best of my ability. I'm by no means an expert, but you can always get my insight, whenever you want. Did
you say your link was YBananas?
YBananas? No.
Oh.
First initial last name, but it would be YBanana.
You might have to change that now.
It would be memorable.
It's just YBOODHAN. So it's first initial last name.
Cool. Thank you. How about you, Sarah? Allie, go ahead.
Allie, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm just going from left to right. That's.
It's funny because we all have different configurations on our screen.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. So yeah, my it's just my full name, Sarah Panaligan, and I'm assuming you can see that because I can see it in the little window there. On LinkedIn, on Twitter, it's my first initial S and then the word piano, because my previous life I was a concert pianist. So Spiano Dev is my handle on Twitter, and I mostly tweet about things like I'll actually tweet about my 100 days of code. I tweeted about this. I try to keep it really dev specific on that particular medium. So be happy to connect with anyone there.
Cool. How about you, Allie?
All right. You can reach me on LinkedIn at Allie Pasiga. Always happy to connect. And yeah, that's pretty much my only social media.
All right, cool. So yeah, again, everyone, thank you so much for coming on. Everyone that's watching the podcast, thanks for watching. Like I said, we're going to do more coding bootcamp reviews. I already have a few planned. I'm not going to say which they are and who I'm inviting on, but I definitely want to do more of these. So if you are considering a coding bootcamp, definitely subscribe, like, follow, whatever you need to do, so that you know, or you're notified when we do have our next episode. And we do these live on Twitch TV /DonTheDeveloper at every Friday at 6 p.m. Central Time. So we'll do more of these. And Shoma, Allie, Sarah, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate having you. And I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Don. It was nice meeting all of you.
Guys, yeah, I'm definitely going to connect with you after this.